Hi there, and welcome back to Craft Queen Juju, a channel where I do some cozy crafting and document my art projects. I'm very excited because in this video, we're going to be making a Halloween costume. It's finally fall, and I'm so excited to be working on some spooky crafts. Today's project is a little bit unique because I'm not making a costume entirely from scratch. I'm actually building on a costume I made last year. I've had this idea for a while that I want to hand make a Halloween costume that I can wear year after year, but I can annually add new embellishments. And last year I decided on a witch costume, a Halloween classic. I was inspired by vintage witch dress designs with folk art motifs. I also found a lot of creative witch hat designs that were super fun. So my first go at the costume consisted of an orange skirt, a crocheted spiderweb corset, and a little capelet with a beaded bat brooch. I was still very new to sewing at the time, so it was actually my first skirt, and I made it out of an old tablecloth. Some questionable sewing on the front, but I pulled it all together with a store-bought thrifted witch hat, and it wasn't too bad for my first try. But this year, we're going to be building the costume out, and hopefully make some major improvements. The big things I want to make are a witch hat and a dress. The hat I want to sew out of wool felt and hopefully add some fun designs with embroidery or beads. The dress I found a pattern for on Etsy, which has big balloon sleeves and 3 tiers of fabric. I'll link it in the description if you want to make your own. So the final costume this year will hopefully be a felt hat with beaded embroidery, a black tier dress with big sleeves, the spiderweb crocheted corset, and underneath it all, the orange leaf skirt. So off to gather supplies. I got felt for the hat and the accent designs, stiff interfacing for the brim, and then I shopped around for some beads. I already had some black fabric for the dress, so it was an easy trip. I chose this gray color to sew on moon and star shapes, and these black seed beads to embroider the outlines. I decided to get the hard part out of the way for both projects and cut out all the pattern pieces in advance. With all of that done and ready, it was time to sew. I used a free pattern for the hat, which I'll link below. I cut out star and moon shapes and beaded them onto the top piece. It took me hours, but I'm really pleased with the final look. I then took all my pieces and sandwiched them together. The felt brims got attached to the cone top, so I had this kind of floppy witch hat all put together. But to give it its structure, I inserted the interfacing and sewed it onto the brim pieces one at a time. I was very scared about wrinkles or buckles in the fabric, but I pulled the felt out and to the right as I sewed, and I actually had no problems. Then all I had to do was sew on a strip of felt around the edge to finish it up. I decided also to add a little bit of lace trim to the edge, just to give it a little more maximalist flair. I had sewed this onto my store-bought witch hat from last year, so I just had to rip the seams and then reattach it to my new hat. And it's so cute! It was a super simple pattern, way better than any store-bought piece. I just love it. After my hat euphoria crashed, I realized I had to actually make the dress, which took a good chunk of time to sew together, but luckily the pattern I bought was super simple and it turned out pretty great. It was my first time doing machine buttonholes, which were much easier than I thought. And overall, the dress is super comfy, very fun, and was the perfect base for this year's costume. I put the crocheted corset over it, layered the orange skirt underneath, and wore this look to my local Renaissance fair. It was really lovely, the dress was so fun, the hat looked amazing, and I really liked it all together. Something did just feel missing though. A big one was the corset, which was black on the black dress, so it wasn't really visible and you couldn't really tell that they were spider webs. I also didn't find a way to incorporate my bat brooch, which really brought it all together last year. So I went back to my craft room. There was still plenty of time before Halloween. I decided to make a lining for the corset so it would contrast against the black dress and you could see it better. I debated using this kind of fun, spooky cat fabric, but it was a little too noisy, so I ended up buying a small swatch of this orangey yellow spandex instead. The next 5 hours of my life consisted of jumping straight into sewing, not actually measuring anything, and then having to rip it all out and re-sew it anyways. In hindsight, I would have actually drafted myself a pattern or maybe thought through all the logistics, but sometimes I just have to learn by facing the consequences of my actions. It did all come together in the end, a few lumpy parts and raw edges, but overall it fit great and did show off the spiderweb pattern. I did have a huge success in all the chaos. The corset originally had these very thin yarn straps that were not very structurally sound, so I decided I wanted to replace them with kind of big, ruffly straps instead. I dug up some scrap yellow fabric, sewed 2 little tubes of them, and then gathered it up in the middle. I sewed on buttonholes and buttons to the back so they could be adjustable. And oh my gosh, it turned out so adorable. I also found out a way to pin my bat brooch to the front of my dress and add a few embellishments. And with that, the costume was done. I am so happy with this. The lining and straps of the little corset piece really made a difference. I'm already brainstorming all the improvements I'm gonna make to the costume next year, but this was such a fun project. I wore it to a Halloween party and really had a blast. Thanks so much for watching me craft this costume. As always, I'll link all the patterns I used in the description. Happy Halloween, everyone, and I'll see you in my next craft video.